The opulent Rosewood mansion stood proudly against the backdrop of the setting sun in Beverly Hills, its manicured lawns and gleaming windows a testament to the wealth and status of its owners. But behind those pristine walls, a storm was brewing, one that would shake the very foundations of the Rosewood family and change the lives of everyone involved forever. Maria Hernandez, a petite woman in her early 30s with kind brown eyes and calloused hands, hurried through the mansion's grand hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She had worked as a housekeeper for the Rosewood family for the past 5 years, tirelessly maintaining their lavish lifestyle while struggling to make ends meet for her own family. Today, however, everything was about to change. Maria! The shrill voice of Victoria Rosewood, the family matriarch, echoed through the marble-floored foyer. "Get in here this instant." With trembling hands, Maria smoothed down her simple uniform and entered the opulent living room. Victoria Rosewood, a statuesque blonde woman dripping in diamonds, stood in the center of the room, her ice-blue eyes flashing with barely contained rage. "Why yes, Mrs. Rosewood?" Maria stammered, her accent thickening with fear. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand shot out, grabbing Maria's wrist in a vice-like grip. "Don't play innocent with me, you little thief," she hissed, her face contorted with fury. "My sapphire necklace is missing, and I know you took it." Maria's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "No, Mrs. Rosewood, I swear I didn't." "Silence!" Victoria roared, her grip tightening painfully. "I've tolerated your presence in this house for far too long. I should have known better than to trust someone like you around my precious belongings." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she frantically shook her head. "Please, Mrs. Rosewood, I would never steal from you. I'm honest, I work hard." A cruel laugh escaped Victoria's painted lips. "Honest? Hardworking? Don't make me laugh. You're nothing but a dirty, lying immigrant who's been waiting for the perfect opportunity to rob us blind." The sound of approaching footsteps caused Victoria to release Maria's wrist abruptly. Alexander Rosewood, Victoria's husband and the family patriarch, entered the room, his salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed and his expensive suit immaculate. "What's all this commotion about, darling?" he asked, his deep voice laced with curiosity and a hint of annoyance. Victoria turned to her husband, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "Oh, Alexander. It's terrible. My sapphire necklace, the one you gave me for our anniversary, it's gone. And this woman," she spat, gesturing dismissively at Maria, "she's the only one who could have taken it." Alexander's steely gray eyes narrowed as he regarded Maria. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. Maria's heart raced as she looked between the two powerful figures before her. "No, Mr. Rosewood, I swear on my life I didn't take anything. I would never." "Save your excuses," Alexander interrupted, holding up a hand. "Victoria, call the police. We'll let them sort this out." As Victoria reached for her phone with a triumphant smirk, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. All heads turned to see Ethan Rosewood, Alexander and Victoria's 25-year-old son, stumbling into the living room, a half-empty bottle of whiskey dangling from his fingers. "What's going on?" he slurred, his handsome features twisted in a drunken haze. "Why's everyone yellin'?" Victoria's face paled as she took in her son's disheveled appearance. "Ethan, darling, go back to your room. We're handling a situation with the help." Ethan's bleary eyes focused on Maria, and for a moment, a flicker of recognition and fear passed across his face. "Maria? What are you doing here?" Before anyone could respond, the grand entrance doors burst open, and in strode Olivia Blackwood, the Rosewoods' neighbor and Victoria's bitter rival in the local social scene. Her fiery red hair bounced with each confident step as she surveyed the tense scene before her. Well, Olivia drawled, a wicked smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. What do we have here? A little family drama on a Tuesday afternoon? Victoria's face contorted with barely contained rage. This doesn't concern you, Olivia. How dare you barge into my home uninvited? Olivia's emerald eyes sparkled with mischief as she sauntered further into the room. Oh, but I think it does concern me, Vicky dear. You see, I couldn't help but overhear your little accusation. She turned to Maria, her gaze softening slightly. And I simply couldn't stand by and watch an innocent woman be persecuted. Alexander stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. Olivia, I must insist that you leave. This is a private family matter. Is it now? Olivia challenged, reaching into her designer handbag. Then perhaps you'd like to explain this? With a flourish, she produced a glittering sapphire necklace, its deep blue stones catching the light and sending prismatic reflections dancing across the walls. A collective gasp filled the room. Victoria's eyes bulged as she stared at the necklace in Olivia's hand. That's my necklace. How did you? Olivia's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. Oh, Vicky, you really should be more careful about where you leave your trinkets. I found this little beauty hanging from a branch in my rose garden this morning. It seems someone had a wild night and got a bit careless, wouldn't you say? All eyes turned to Ethan, who had suddenly gone very pale despite his inebriated state. He swayed on his feet, the whiskey bottle slipping from his grasp and shattering on the marble floor. I didn't mean to, he mumbled, tears welling up in his bloodshot eyes. I just needed some cash for what, son? Alexander demanded, his voice dangerously low. Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. For gambling debts, he whispered. I've been losing big at the casino, and I thought I could sell the necklace to cover what I owe. Victoria let out a strangled cry, sinking onto the nearest chaise lounge. Oh, Ethan, how could you? As the Rosewood family grappled with this shocking revelation, Maria stood frozen in place, her mind reeling from the rapid turn of events. She had been moments away from ruin, from losing everything she had worked so hard for, all because of a false accusation. Olivia approached Maria, gently taking her hand. I'm so sorry you had to go through this, dear. No one should be treated this way, especially someone as kind and hardworking as you. Maria's eyes filled with grateful tears as she looked up at Olivia. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. I don't know what to say. Alexander cleared his throat, his face a mask of shame and regret. Maria, we owe you an apology. A very big one. Victoria, however, was not so easily swayed. She rose from the chaise, her eyes blazing with a mixture of humiliation and anger. This changes nothing, she hissed. She may not have stolen the necklace, but she's still nothing but a... That's enough, Victoria! Alexander roared, silencing his wife. He turned to Maria, his expression softening. Maria, please forgive us. We've treated you abominably, and there's no excuse for it. I hope you'll allow us to make amends. As Maria stood there, surrounded by the chaos of the Rosewood family's unraveling secrets, she felt a strange mix of emotions washing over her. Relief at being exonerated, anger at the injustice she had faced, and an unexpected glimmer of hope for what the future might hold. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her resilience, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately lead her to a destiny far greater than she could have ever imagined. The Rosewood mansion, once a symbol of her oppression, was about to become the stage for a drama that would change not only her life but the lives of everyone in Beverly Hills. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the luxurious living room, Maria took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same quiet strength and dignity that had carried her through years of hardship. The game had changed, and Maria Hernandez was no longer just a housekeeper accused of theft. She was a woman on the brink of a transformation that would shake the very foundations of Beverly Hills society. The following weeks in Beverly Hills were a whirlwind of change and revelation. The Rosewood mansion, once a bastion of wealth and prestige, now stood as a symbol of secrets and lies. For Maria Hernandez, life had taken a turn she could never have anticipated. In the days following the dramatic confrontation, Alexander Rosewood had made good on his promise to make amends. Much to Victoria's chagrin, he had not only doubled Maria's salary but also offered her a position as the household manager, giving her authority over all the staff and day-to-day operations of the mansion. "This is preposterous, Alexander," Victoria had shrieked when he announced the decision. "You can't possibly trust her with such responsibility." Alexander's steely gaze had silenced his wife. "I trust her far more than I trust anyone else in this house right now, Victoria. Including you." Those words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the already strained relationship between the Rosewood patriarch and matriarch. Victoria retreated to her wing of the mansion, nursing her wounded pride and plotting her revenge. For Maria, the promotion was both a blessing and a curse. While she was grateful for the opportunity and the increased income that would help support her aging parents back in Mexico, she was acutely aware of the target now painted on her back. Victoria's icy glares and whispered threats made it clear that the war was far from over. One particularly tense morning, as Maria was overseeing the preparation for an important charity gala the Rosewoods were hosting, she found herself face to face with Ethan in the mansion's expansive kitchen. "Maria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The young man looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes betraying his ongoing struggle with addiction. "Can we talk? Privately?" Hesitantly, Maria nodded, following Ethan to the secluded garden terrace. The sweet scent of blooming roses filled the air, a stark contrast to the heaviness of the moment. "I wanted to apologize," Ethan began, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "What happened to you? It was all my fault. I was desperate, and I never meant for you to take the blame." Maria studied the young man before her, seeing not the arrogant playboy she had known for years, but a broken soul in desperate need of help. "Mr. Ethan," she said softly, her accent lilting her words, "why didn't you ask your parents for help? Surely they would have." Ethan's bitter laugh cut her off. "You don't know my parents like I do, Maria. To them, appearances are everything. A son with a gambling addiction? It would destroy their precious reputation." As Maria opened her mouth to respond, a shadow fell across the terrace. They turned to see Olivia Blackwood standing there, her emerald eyes gleaming with interest. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Olivia purred, sauntering towards them. The prodigal son and the virtuous housekeeper having a secret rendezvous. Maria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but Ethan stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "This isn't what it looks like, Olivia. And it's none of your business anyway." Olivia's laugh tinkled like crystal. "Oh, darling, everything in this town is my business. Especially when it involves the Rosewoods." She turned her piercing gaze to Maria. "You do well to remember that, my dear. In Beverly Hills, secrets are the most valuable currency of all." With a wink and a swish of her designer dress, Olivia sashayed back into the mansion, leaving Maria and Ethan in stunned silence. "Don't let her get to you," Ethan muttered, but Maria could see the fear in his eyes. Whatever hold Olivia had over the Rosewood family, it was powerful enough to make even the rebellious Ethan cower. As the day of the charity gala arrived, the mansion was a flurry of activity. Florists, caterers, and event planners scurried about under Maria's watchful eye, transforming the already luxurious home into a glittering wonderland. Victoria Rosewood emerged from her self-imposed exile, resplendent in a crimson gown that hugged her statuesque figure. Her icy blue eyes narrowed as she surveyed Maria's work. "Well," she sniffed, "I suppose you haven't completely ruined everything. Though I don't recall approving these gaudy centerpieces." Maria bit her tongue, forcing a polite smile. "Mrs. Rosewood, these are the exact centerpieces you chose last month. I have the order form with your signature, if you'd like to see it." Victoria's face flushed with anger, but before she could retort, Alexander appeared, looking dashing in a tailored tuxedo. "Everything looks magnificent, Maria," he said warmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've outdone yourself." The touch, though innocent, did not go unnoticed by Victoria. Her eyes flashed dangerously as she watched the interaction between her husband and the woman she considered beneath her. As guests began to arrive, Maria retreated to the kitchen to oversee the catering staff. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice the figure lurking in the shadows until a hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. "Don't make a sound," a gruff voice whispered in her ear. "You're coming with me, and if you try anything, your precious family back in Mexico will pay the price." Terror gripped Maria's heart as she was roughly dragged through the service entrance and shoved into a waiting car. As the vehicle sped away from the mansion, Maria caught a glimpse of her captor, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek. "Who are you?" she gasped, her mind racing with fear. "What do you want with me?" The man's laughter was cold and humorless. "It's not about what I want, sweetheart. It's about what Mr. Rosewood owes. And you're the insurance policy." Meanwhile, back at the gala, the cream of Beverly Hills society mingled and gossiped, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding beyond the mansion's walls. Victoria held court near the champagne fountain, her tinkling laughter masking the venom in her words as she spoke to a group of socialites. "Can you believe Alexander actually promoted that little gold digger to household manager?" she hissed, her smile never faltering. "I swear, sometimes I think he's lost his mind." Olivia Blackwood, who had been eavesdropping nearby, sauntered over with a predatory grin. Now, Victoria," she chided playfully, "you shouldn't speak ill of the help. Especially when they know all your dirty little secrets." Victoria's face paled slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia. Unlike some people, I have nothing to hide." Olivia's emerald eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh, darling, we all have something to hide. It's just a matter of who's better at keeping their skeletons in the closet." As the two women engaged in their verbal sparring match, Ethan stumbled into the room, his eyes wild and unfocused. He made a beeline for his father, who was deep in conversation with the mayor. "Dad," Ethan slurred, grabbing Alexander's arm. "We need to talk. Now." Alexander's face tightened with barely contained fury. "Not now, Ethan. Can't you see I'm in the middle of something important?" But Ethan was beyond caring about social niceties. "It's about Maria," he hissed. "She's gone." The color drained from Alexander's face. "What do you mean, gone?" Before Ethan could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Detective Jack Harper, a ruggedly handsome man in his early 40s, strode into the room, his badge glinting under the crystal chandeliers. "Mr. and Mrs. Rosewood," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about your housekeeper, Maria Hernandez." A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned to the Rosewood family. Victoria, sensing an opportunity to regain control of the situation, glided over to the detective with a concerned expression expertly plastered on her face. "Oh, Detective Harper," she cooed, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "How dreadful! What's happened to our dear Maria?" Detective Harper's steely gaze swept over the assembled guests. I'm afraid Ms. Hernandez has been kidnapped. We have reason to believe it's connected to some, shall we say, questionable business dealings. Alexander Rosewood's face turned ashen. Kidnapped, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. But who would? That's what we're here to find out, Mr. Rosewood, Harper interrupted. And I have a feeling you might be able to shed some light on the situation. As the detective led Alexander and Victoria to a private room for questioning, the gala erupted into a frenzy of whispers and speculation. Olivia Blackwood watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of amusement and calculation, her mind already spinning with ways to use this latest scandal to her advantage. Ethan, forgotten in the chaos, slumped against a wall, his hand shaking as he pulled out his phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number he had sworn never to use again. "It's me," he whispered when the call connected. "I need your help. It's time to make things right." As the night wore on, the glittering facade of Beverly Hills began to crumble, revealing the dark underbelly of secrets, lies, and betrayal that had been festering beneath the surface. And somewhere in the city, Maria Hernandez fought against her bonds, praying for a miracle and vowing that if she survived this ordeal, she would uncover the truth that threatened to destroy them all. Little did she know, her kidnapping was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Beverly Hills society and force everyone to confront the demons they had long tried to keep hidden. In the shadows of a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Maria's captor paced nervously, barking orders into a burner phone. "Listen, I don't care what it takes. Get me that money, or the girl dies. Mr. Rosewood has until midnight to pay up, or his little secret goes public." As he ended the call, the man turned to Maria, who was bound to a chair, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. "You better pray your boss comes through, sweetheart. Because if he doesn't, you're going to learn firsthand just how dirty the Rosewood family really is." Maria lifted her chin, a spark of determination flashing in her eyes. "You underestimate me, Senor," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "And you underestimate the power of the truth. Whatever secrets you think you're protecting, they will come to light. And when they do, it won't be the Rosewoods who fall, it will be men like you." The kidnapper's face contorted with rage as he raised his hand to strike her. But before he could make contact, the sound of police sirens pierced the night air, growing louder with each passing second. As red and blue lights began to flash through the grimy warehouse windows, Maria allowed herself a small smile. The game was far from over, and she had no intention of being just a pawn in someone else's twisted plot. Whatever the cost, she would fight for justice, not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced by the wealthy and powerful for far too long. The stage was set for a showdown that would change the landscape of Beverly Hills forever. And at the center of it all was Maria Hernandez, no longer just a housekeeper, but a woman poised to bring an empire crumbling down. The wail of police sirens pierced the night air as a fleet of squad cars converged on the dilapidated warehouse. Inside, Maria Hernandez's heart raced, a mix of fear and hope surging through her veins. Her captor, the burly man with the scarred face, cursed violently as he paced the floor, his plans unraveling before his eyes. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he growled, reaching for his gun. "Someone talked. And I bet I know who it was." Just as he raised the weapon towards Maria, the warehouse doors burst open. Detective Jack Harper led the charge, his gun drawn and his steel blue eyes blazing with determination. "LAPD. Drop your weapon," he shouted, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. The kidnapper, realizing he was cornered, made a desperate lunge for Maria. But before he could reach her, a shot rang out, and he crumpled to the floor, clutching his shoulder. As officers swarmed the warehouse, securing the scene and freeing Maria from her bonds, Detective Harper holstered his weapon and approached her. "Ms. Hernandez," he said softly, his gruff exterior softening slightly. Are you all right? Maria nodded, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had chafed her skin. Yes, I think so. How did you find me? A ghost of a smile played on Harper's lips. Let's just say we had some unexpected help. Come on, let's get you out of here. As they emerged from the warehouse, Maria was shocked to see Ethan Rosewood standing by a police car, his face a mask of guilt and relief. When he saw her, he rushed forward. Maria! Thank God you're okay, he exclaimed, reaching out as if to embrace her before thinking better of it and awkwardly dropping his arms. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Before Maria could respond, Detective Harper stepped between them. Mr. Rosewood, I think it's time you told us exactly what's going on here. Starting with why Ms. Hernandez was targeted in the first place. Ethan's face paled, but he nodded resignedly. You're right. It's time the truth came out. All of it. Meanwhile, back at the Rosewood mansion, the charity gala had devolved into chaos. Guests whispered and speculated wildly about Maria's kidnapping and the Rosewood family's involvement. Victoria Rosewood, her perfectly coiffed exterior beginning to crack, attempted to salvage the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out, her voice strained as she tried to maintain her composure. I assure you, this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. The Rosewood family has always stood for integrity and... Oh, stuff it, Victoria, Olivia Blackwood's voice cut through the crowd like a knife. All eyes turned to the redhead as she sauntered to the center of the room, a wicked gleam in her emerald eyes. I think it's high time everyone knew the truth about the oh-so-perfect Rosewoods, don't you? Victoria's face drained of color. Olivia, don't you dare. But Olivia was beyond caring about social niceties or long-standing rivalries. She turned to address the rapt audience of Beverly Hills elite. Did you know that our dear Alexander has been embezzling funds from his own company for years? Or that Victoria here has been having an affair with her tennis instructor? Oh, and let's not forget about young Ethan's gambling debts, which Daddy has been quietly paying off to avoid scandal. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Alexander Rosewood, who had been standing frozen at the edge of the room, suddenly found his voice. That's enough, Olivia, he roared, striding towards her with fury etched on his face. Olivia merely laughed, the sound tinkling like broken glass. Oh, but I'm just getting started, darling. You see, I've been collecting secrets for years, biding my time. And now, thanks to your little housekeeper, the house of cards is finally tumbling down. As if on cue, the mansion's grand doors swung open, and Detective Harper entered, flanked by Maria and a handcuffed Ethan. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the unlikely trio. Mr. and Mrs. Rosewood, Harper announced, his voice carrying across the stunned gathering. I'm afraid you're both under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and endangerment of Ms. Hernandez. Victoria let out a strangled cry, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. This is preposterous. We've done nothing wrong. But Alexander, his shoulders slumped in defeat, merely nodded. It's over, Victoria, he said quietly. We can't run from this anymore. As the police led the Rosewood parents away, Maria found herself at the center of attention. The very people who had looked down on her for years now regarded her with a mixture of awe and fear. She had become the unlikely catalyst for the downfall of one of Beverly Hills' most powerful families. Olivia sidled up to Maria, a sly smile playing on her lips. Well played, my dear, she purred. I must say, I underestimated you. Perhaps we should join forces. With your inside knowledge and my connections, we could rule this town. Maria met Olivia's gaze steadily, a new confidence radiating from her. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood, but I'm not interested in ruling anyone. All I've ever wanted was the truth and justice." Olivia's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Suit yourself, darling. But remember, in Beverly Hills, the game never truly ends. It just changes players." As the last of the shell-shocked guests filtered out of the mansion, Maria found herself alone in the grand foyer, the events of the night weighing heavily on her. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a gentle hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find herself face to face with Carmen, the Rosewood's longtime cook and Maria's closest friend in the household. The older woman's eyes were filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "Oh, mi querida," Carmen said softly, pulling Maria into a warm embrace. "You've been so brave. But are you truly ready for what comes next?" Maria pulled back, confusion etched on her face. "What do you mean, Carmen?" The older woman sighed, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "There are more secrets buried in this house than even you know, Maria. The Rosewoods, they're just the tip of the iceberg." Before Maria could press for more information, Detective Harper approached, his face grave. "Ms. Hernandez, I hate to ask this of you after everything you've been through, but we need your help. There's more to this case than we initially thought, and you might be the key to unraveling it all." Maria's mind reeled as she looked between Carmen and the detective. She had believed that with the Rosewood's arrest, her ordeal was over. But now, it seemed, she was being pulled even deeper into a web of secrets and lies that stretched far beyond the mansion's gilded walls. Taking a deep breath, Maria straightened her shoulders and met Harper's gaze. "What do you need me to do, detective?" Harper's eyes softened with admiration for her resilience. "We need you to go undercover. The Rosewood case has opened up a can of worms, exposing a network of corruption that goes all the way to City Hall. You're in a unique position to help us bring it all down." Maria's heart raced at the prospect. She thought of her family back in Mexico, of the years she'd spent working tirelessly to support them. She thought of all the other immigrant workers in Beverly Hills, exploited and silenced by the wealthy and powerful. And in that moment, she made her decision. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes to expose the truth and bring justice to those who have abused their power." As Maria agreed to take on this dangerous new role, little did she know that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake Beverly Hills to its very core. Old alliances would crumble, new ones would form, and the line between friend and foe would blur beyond recognition. Across town, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city, a phone rang. A manicured hand picked it up, bringing it to an ear adorned with a diamond earring worth more than most people's yearly salary. "Yes," a smooth, cultured voice answered. "It's done," came the reply. "The Rosewoods have fallen. But there's a complication. The housekeeper, Maria Hernandez. She's agreed to work with the police." There was a moment of silence before the cultured voice spoke again, a hint of steel underlying its calm exterior. "Then we'll just have to make sure Ms. Hernandez has an unfortunate accident, won't we? After all, dead housekeepers tell no tales." As the call ended, the owner of the voice turned to gaze out over the glittering Los Angeles skyline. For decades, they had pulled the strings of power from the shadows, manipulating Beverly Hills elite like puppets. The Rosewoods were merely pawns in a much larger game. And now, this insignificant housekeeper threatened to bring it all crashing down. A cruel smile played across perfectly painted lips. "Welcome to the big leagues, Maria Hernandez. Let's see if you have what it takes to survive." Back at the Rosewood mansion, now a hub of police activity, Maria stood on the balcony overlooking the perfectly manicured gardens. The cool night air caressed her face as she contemplated the dizzying turn her life had taken. Detective Harper joined her, leaning against the balustrade with a heavy sigh. You know, when I first started investigating the Rosewoods, I never imagined it would lead to all this, he confessed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Maria turned to him, curiosity piqued. How did you become involved in the case, detective? Harper's eyes took on a distant look, as if seeing something far beyond the moonlit gardens. It started with a tip from an anonymous source. At first, I thought it was just another rich family trying to cover up their dirty laundry. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized this went far beyond the Rosewoods. He turned to face Maria, his expression serious. There's a network of corruption in this city that goes back decades. Politicians, business leaders, even some in law enforcement, all working together to keep their power and wealth, no matter who gets hurt in the process. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. And you think I can help bring them down? Harper nodded slowly. You've been inside their world, Maria. You've seen things, heard things that could be crucial to our investigation. But I won't lie to you, it's going to be dangerous. These people won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their empire. As if to underscore his words, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the nearby patio lights, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, Maria could have sworn she saw a shadow move in the garden below, but when she blinked, it was gone. Shaking off her unease, Maria squared her shoulders. I understand the risks, detective. But I've spent my whole life being invisible to people like the Rosewoods. Now, I have a chance to make a real difference. I won't back down. Harper's face broke into a rare smile. I had a feeling you'd say that. All right then, let's get started. Tomorrow, we'll begin your training. You'll need to learn how to gather evidence, use surveillance equipment, and most importantly, how to protect yourself. As they turned to head back inside, Maria caught sight of her reflection in the balcony doors. Gone was the timid housekeeper who had once scurried through these halls, trying to avoid notice. In her place stood a woman transformed, confident, determined, and ready to take on the corrupt powers that be. Little did Maria know, her transformation was about to be put to the ultimate test. For in the shadowy corners of Beverly Hills, wheels were already in motion. The fallen Rosewoods were just the beginning, and the true puppet masters were preparing to make their move. As dawn broke over the City of Angels, Maria Hernandez stepped into her new role, ready to uncover the shocking truths that lay buried beneath the glitz and glamour of Beverly Hills. The stage was set for a battle that would redefine the balance of power in this gilded world of secrets and lies. But one question remained: in a game where everyone wore a mask, who could Maria truly trust? The Beverly Hills Country Club was a haven of luxury and exclusivity, its manicured lawns and sparkling pools a playground for the rich and powerful. But on this particular sun-drenched afternoon, it was also the stage for a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Maria Hernandez, once a humble housekeeper and now an undercover operative, moved gracefully between the tables on the club's terrace, her designer uniform a far cry from the simple clothes she once wore. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing as she refilled champagne flutes and cleared away delicate hors d'oeuvres plates. It had been 3 months since the fall of the Rosewood family, and Maria had spent every moment since then preparing for this mission. Detective Harper had put her through rigorous training, self-defense, surveillance techniques, and the art of blending in while standing out just enough to be useful to those in power. As she approached a table where several well-dressed men were engaged in hushed conversation, Maria's carefully trained ear picked up snippets that made her pulse quicken. The shipment arrives next week, one man murmured, his gold watch glinting in the sunlight. Make sure the coast is clear. We can't afford another incident like the one with the Rosewoods. Maria's hand trembled slightly as she reached for an empty glass, her mind racing. This could be the break they'd been waiting for. But before she could hear more, a familiar voice cut through the air. Well, if it isn't our lovely new server, Olivia Blackwood purred, sauntering up to the table. Gentlemen, you simply must try the caviar. It's divine. As the men's attention shifted to Olivia, Maria caught the redhead's eye. For a moment, something passed between them, a flicker of recognition, a hint of a challenge. Then Olivia turned away, leaving Maria to wonder, not for the first time, whose side the enigmatic socialite was really on. Later that evening, in a nondescript apartment across town, Maria sat across from Detective Harper, recounting what she'd overheard. A shipment, Harper mused, his brow furrowed. Could be drugs, weapons, or something worse. Good work, Maria. We're getting closer. Maria nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Detective, she began hesitantly, I can't help but feel we're missing something. The men at the club, they spoke as if they answered to someone else. Someone higher up. Harper's eyes met hers, a grim smile playing on his lips. You're right. We've long suspected there's a puppet master pulling the strings in Beverly Hills. Someone with enough power and influence to keep their hands clean while others do their dirty work. But who? Maria pressed. Before Harper could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Harper motioned for Maria to stay quiet as he drew his gun and approached the door cautiously. He peered through the peephole, then relaxed, holstering his weapon. It's okay, he said, opening the door. It's a friend. Maria's jaw dropped as Ethan Rosewood stepped into the apartment. Gone was the polished playboy she'd once known. In his place stood a man haunted by his past, his designer clothes replaced by a simple t-shirt and jeans. Ethan? Maria gasped. What are you doing here? Ethan's eyes, once clouded by addiction, now burned with a fierce determination. I'm here to help, he said firmly. I've made a lot of mistakes, hurt a lot of people. But I want to make things right. And I think I know who's really behind all of this. As Ethan began to speak, revealing secrets that had been buried for decades, Maria felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The conspiracy they were unraveling was bigger and more insidious than any of them had imagined. Across town, in a penthouse suite overlooking the city, a figure stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. A phone rang, and a manicured hand reached out to answer it. Yes? The voice was smooth, cultured, and tinged with impatience. We have a problem, came the reply. The housekeeper is getting too close. And now Ethan Rosewood has resurfaced. There was a moment of tense silence before the figure spoke again. Then it's time we reminded Ms. Hernandez of her place in our world. Arrange an accident. Something regrettable. As the call ended, the figure turned, revealing the face of Judge Eleanor Winters, one of the most respected members of the Beverly Hills judiciary. Her steel-gray eyes, usually so adept at discerning truth from lies in her courtroom, now held a cold, calculating gleam. For years, Eleanor had built her empire from the shadows, using her position on the bench to manipulate cases, protect her allies, and eliminate her enemies. The Rosewoods had been useful pawns, but ultimately expendable. Now, this former housekeeper threatened to unravel everything she had worked so hard to create. A cruel smile played across Eleanor's lips as she lifted a glass of aged scotch. You want to play in the big leagues, Maria? Let's see how you handle what comes next. The following day, Maria found herself back at the Rosewood mansion, now eerily quiet and devoid of the opulence that once filled its halls. She had convinced Harper that returning to the scene where it all began might yield new clues. As she walked through the empty rooms, memories flooded back, the accusations, the betrayals, the moment when her life had changed forever. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the sound of footsteps behind her. Spinning around, Maria came face to face with Carmen, the Rosewood's former cook and her one-time confidant. Carmen! Maria exclaimed, relief washing over her. What are you doing here? The older woman's face was etched with worry. "Oh, Maria, mi querida. I've been trying to reach you. You're in terrible danger." Before Maria could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Smoke began to fill the room as a canister rolled across the floor, spewing a noxious gas. "Run!" Carmen shouted, pushing Maria towards the nearest exit. Heart pounding, Maria raced through the mansion, her eyes stinging and lungs burning. As she burst through the back door into the garden, a figure loomed before her. Through her blurred vision, she saw the glint of a knife. In that moment, all of her training kicked in. Maria ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the blade as it sliced through the air. She landed a solid kick to her attacker's midsection, sending them stumbling backward. Just as she thought she might escape, a sharp pain exploded in her side. Maria looked down to see a growing red stain on her blouse. The world began to spin as she stumbled and fell. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of expensive shoes stepping into view and a familiar voice saying, "Such a pity. She could have been so useful." When Maria regained consciousness, she found herself in a sterile hospital room, the steady beep of monitors filling the air. Detective Harper sat by her bedside, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "Thank God you're awake," he said, leaning forward. "Maria, I'm so sorry. We should have been more careful." Maria tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her side. "What happened? How did I get here?" Harper's expression darkened. "Someone called in an anonymous tip. By the time we got to the mansion, you were unconscious in the garden. The doctors say if the knife had been an inch to the left." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Maria reached out, squeezing his hand. "It's not your fault, detective. But we need to figure out who's behind this. And fast." As if on cue, the door opened and Olivia Blackwood sauntered in, looking as impeccable as ever in a designer suit. Well, she drawled, her emerald eyes taking in the scene. "Looks like our little housekeeper has more lives than a cat." Harper stood, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "Mrs. Blackwood, this is a restricted area. How did you get in here?" Olivia's laugh was like tinkling glass. "Oh, darling, there isn't a door in Beverly Hills that's closed to me. But relax, I'm here to help." She turned to Maria, her expression suddenly serious. "You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest, my dear. The people you're up against, they won't stop until you're silenced. But I have information that might just save your life." Maria and Harper exchanged wary glances. Could they trust Olivia? Her allegiances had always been murky at best. But at this point, they were running out of options. "What kind of information?" Maria asked cautiously. Olivia's red lips curved into a knowing smile. "The kind that goes all the way to the top. Tell me, have either of you ever wondered why Judge Eleanor Winters always seems to be at the center of every major case in this town?" As Olivia began to outline a conspiracy that reached into the highest echelons of Beverly Hills society, Maria felt a chill run down her spine. The game had changed once again, and the stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, across town, Judge Eleanor Winters sat in her chambers, a chessboard laid out before her. With deliberate precision, she moved a pawn forward, a smile playing on her lips. "Check," she murmured to herself. "Your move, Ms. Hernandez." Little did Eleanor know, Maria was about to make a move that would change the game entirely. For in her hospital room, clutching a small recorder hidden beneath her blanket, Maria had captured every word of Olivia's revelation. The pieces were falling into place, and the true face of corruption in Beverly Hills was about to be exposed. But as Maria looked out her hospital window at the glittering city below, she couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part of her journey was yet to come. In the shadowy corners of Beverly Hills, alliances were shifting, secrets were surfacing, and the line between friend and foe was blurring beyond recognition. Maria Hernandez, once a simple housekeeper, now stood at the center of a storm that threatened to tear the city's gilded facade apart. As night fell over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the hospital room, Maria made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, she would see this through to the end. The truth would come to light, and justice would be served, not just for her, but for all those who had been silenced and exploited by the corrupt powers that be. Little did she know, her greatest test was yet to come. For in the game of power and secrets that ruled Beverly Hills, the final play would demand a sacrifice none of them were prepared to make. The Los Angeles skyline glittered like a cascade of diamonds against the inky night sky, but for Maria Hernandez, the city's beauty held a sinister undertone. From the balcony of her safe house apartment, she gazed out at the sprawling metropolis, her mind racing with the revelations of the past few days. It had been a week since her narrow escape from death at the Rosewood mansion, and the recording she'd made of Olivia Blackwood's confession had set in motion a series of events that threatened to tear Beverly Hills apart at its very seams. "You're sure you want to go through with this?" Detective Jack Harper's gruff voice came from behind her. "Once we make this move, there's no going back." Maria turned to face him, her eyes blazing with determination. "We've come too far to back down now, Detective. Judge Winters and her accomplices have to be brought to justice." Harper nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. "All right then. Let's go over the plan one more time." As they huddled over a table strewn with documents and surveillance photos, neither of them noticed the sleek black car pulling up across the street, nor the figure that emerged from it, melting into the shadows. Across town, in her opulent penthouse, Judge Eleanor Winters sat before her mirror, meticulously applying her makeup. To an outsider, she appeared the picture of calm sophistication. But the slight tremor in her hand as she applied her lipstick betrayed the turmoil beneath her polished exterior. A soft knock at the door made her pause. "Enter," she called out, her voice steady despite her inner tension. Olivia Blackwood sauntered in, her emerald eyes taking in the judge's reflection. My, Eleanor. You look positively radiant for someone whose empire is on the brink of collapse." Eleanor's eyes flashed dangerously as she turned to face the redhead. "I thought I made it clear that you were never to come here, Olivia. Have you lost what little sense you had left?" Olivia's laughter tinkled through the room like broken glass. "Oh, darling. Did you really think I'd let you throw me to the wolves? I've made my own arrangements. The question is, what are you going to do about our little housekeeper problem?" Before Eleanor could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. As she read it, the color drained from her face. "What is it?" Olivia asked, her curiosity piqued. Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper as she replied, "It's from my contact in the DA's office. They're moving to indict me. Tomorrow." For a moment, the two women stared at each other, years of rivalry and shared secrets hanging between them. Then, slowly, a wicked smile spread across Olivia's face. "Well then," she purred, "I suppose it's time for Plan B." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit parking garage across the city, Ethan Rosewood paced nervously, checking his watch for the 10th time in as many minutes. The sound of approaching footsteps made him freeze, his hand instinctively moving to the gun hidden beneath his jacket. "Easy there, rich boy," a familiar voice called out. "It's just me." Carmen, the former Rosewood cook, emerged from the shadows, her usually kind face set in grim lines. "Did you get it?" Ethan nodded, producing a USB drive from his pocket. "It's all here. Financial records, coded messages, everything that links my father to Judge Winters' operation." "But Carmen, are you sure about this? Once we hand this over to Maria and the detective, there's no protecting my family." Carmen's eyes softened as she looked at the young man before her. Gone was the spoiled, reckless playboy she'd known for years. In his place stood a man haunted by his family's sins but determined to make things right. "Your family made their choices, Ethan," she said gently. "Now it's time to make yours." As Ethan handed over the drive, neither of them noticed the glint of a camera lens in the darkness, capturing every moment of their clandestine meeting. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but there was a tension in the air that seemed to crackle like electricity. At the Beverly Hills courthouse, a media frenzy was brewing. Reporters jostled for position on the steps, their cameras at the ready. Inside, Maria Hernandez stood before a mirror in a small antechamber, adjusting her simple but elegant suit. Gone was the timid housekeeper who had once scurried through the halls of the Rosewood mansion. In her place stood a woman transformed, confident, determined, and ready to bring down an empire of corruption. "You ready for this?" Detective Harper asked, appearing at her side. Maria met his gaze in the mirror, a small smile playing on her lips. "I've been ready for this my entire life, Detective." As they made their way to the courtroom, Maria's mind flashed back to all the moments that had led her here: the false accusation of theft, the kidnapping, the attempt on her life. Each challenge had only strengthened her resolve, honing her into a weapon of justice. The courtroom fell silent as Maria took the stand. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, the curious spectators, the anxious defendants, and somewhere among them, she knew, Judge Eleanor Winters. As the questioning began, Maria's voice rang out clear and strong, laying bare the years of corruption, bribery, and exploitation that had plagued Beverly Hills. She spoke of secret meetings overheard in the Rosewood mansion, of coded messages deciphered, of a web of deceit that reached into every corner of the city's elite. With each revelation, a ripple of shock ran through the courtroom. Maria could see the faces of the accused, once proud and untouchable, grow pale with the realization that their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. But it was when Maria produced the recording of Olivia Blackwood's confession that the true bombshell dropped. As Olivia's voice filled the courtroom, detailing Judge Winters' involvement in everything from rigged trials to money laundering, a commotion broke out among the spectators. Amid the chaos, Maria's eyes locked with Eleanor Winters. The judge's face was a mask of cold fury, but beneath it, Maria could see a flicker of something else: fear. As the day's proceedings came to a close, Maria felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had done it. The evidence was overwhelming, and there would be no escaping justice this time. Or so she thought. As Maria and Detective Harper exited the courthouse, a shot rang out, shattering the evening air. Maria felt a searing pain in her shoulder as Harper tackled her to the ground. "Sniper!" someone yelled, and suddenly the courthouse steps were a scene of panic and confusion. Through a haze of pain, Maria saw a figure in black racing away across the rooftops. And then, emerging from the chaos, a face she never expected to see: Ethan Rosewood. "Maria," he cried, dropping to his knees beside her. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." As paramedics rushed to the scene and Harper barked orders into his radio, Maria grasped Ethan's hand. "What do you mean?" she gasped. "Ethan, what have you done?" Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he confessed, "They got to me, Maria. Winters, Olivia, they threatened my family. I told them about the safe house, about the evidence. I never thought they'd go this far. I'm so sorry." Maria's world spun as the implications of Ethan's betrayal sank in. All their careful planning, all the risks they had taken, had it all been for nothing? As she was loaded into an ambulance, Maria caught a glimpse of a familiar figure watching from the shadows: Olivia Blackwood, a triumphant smirk playing on her red lips. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Hours later, in a private hospital room, Maria lay awake, her mind racing despite the pain medication coursing through her system. Detective Harper sat slumped in a chair beside her bed, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. "What do we do now?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harper ran a hand through his graying hair. "I don't know, Maria. With Ethan's betrayal, our case is compromised. Winter's lawyers will argue that all our evidence is tainted." A soft knock at the door interrupted their gloomy contemplation. To their surprise, Carmen entered, followed closely by Victoria Rosewood. "What is she doing here?" Harper demanded, rising to his feet. Victoria, her once perfect appearance now showing signs of strain, held up her hands in a placating gesture. "Please, hear me out. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I have information that could save your case." Maria and Harper exchanged skeptical glances, but desperation won out over caution. "Go on," Maria said. Victoria took a deep breath. Eleanor Winters didn't just corrupt the legal system. She's been blackmailing half of Beverly Hills for years, including my husband and me. She produced a small notebook from her designer handbag. This is Eleanor's personal ledger. It details every bribe, every threat, every dirty secret she's used to maintain her power. I've kept it hidden as insurance, but now I want to make things right. As Victoria handed over the ledger, tears glistening in her eyes, Maria felt a shift in the air. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Across town, in a private airfield on the outskirts of Los Angeles, Judge Eleanor Winters strode purposefully towards a waiting private jet. Her face was set in grim lines as she checked her watch impatiently. "Come on, Olivia," she muttered. "Where are you?" As if on cue, the roar of an engine cut through the night. Eleanor turned to see a sleek sports car speeding towards her, Olivia Blackwood at the wheel. The car screeched to a halt, and Olivia emerged, looking as impeccable as ever despite the late hour. "Sorry I'm late, darling. Had to tie up a few loose ends." Eleanor's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of loose ends?" Olivia's laughter rang out, sharp and cold in the night air. "Oh, Eleanor. Did you really think I'd let you flee the country without me? After all we've been through?" As the two women faced each other, years of shared secrets and mutual manipulation hanging between them, neither noticed the circle of headlights suddenly illuminating the airfield. "LAPD. Freeze!" Detective Harper's voice boomed through a megaphone. Eleanor and Olivia found themselves surrounded, with no hope of escape. As they were led away in handcuffs, Maria stepped out of one of the police vehicles, her arm in a sling but her eyes blazing with triumph. "It's over," she said softly, watching as the two architects of so much pain and corruption were finally brought to justice. But even as a sense of victory washed over her, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Beverly Hills had been built on secrets and lies for too long. Tearing down one corrupt regime wouldn't be enough to change the system overnight. As the sun began to rise over the city of angels, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Maria Hernandez stood tall, no longer just a housekeeper, but a symbol of hope and change. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, the future looked bright. Little did she know, the biggest revelation of all was yet to come, one that would shake her to her very core and force her to question everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in this glittering, treacherous world. The Beverly Hills County Courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed incessantly, and the air crackled with tension. It was the first day of what promised to be the trial of the century, the people versus Eleanor Winters and Olivia Blackwood. Maria Hernandez sat in the front row of the packed courtroom, her dark eyes fixed on the two women who had once seemed so untouchable. Judge Eleanor Winters, her steel gray hair immaculate and her posture rigid, stared straight ahead, her face an impassive mask. Beside her, Olivia Blackwood managed to look elegant even in her prison jumpsuit, her emerald eyes scanning the room as if she were at a cocktail party rather than facing life in prison. As the bailiff called the court to order, Maria felt a hand squeeze her shoulder. She turned to see Detective Jack Harper, his craggy face etched with a mixture of pride and concern. "You ready for this?" he whispered. Maria nodded, her voice steady as she replied, "I've been ready for this my whole life, Detective." The trial that unfolded over the next weeks was a sensation that gripped not just Beverly Hills, but the entire nation. Day after day, witnesses took the stand, unraveling a web of corruption, blackmail, and deceit that stretched back decades. Victoria Rosewood, her designer clothes replaced by a simple blouse and skirt, testified about years of manipulation and threats. Ethan Rosewood, his boyish good looks marred by shame and regret, confessed to his role in the attempted assassination of Maria. Even Alexander Rosewood, once the picture of power and success, now appeared a broken man as he detailed the bribes and backroom deals that had built his empire. But it was Maria's testimony that held the courtroom spellbound. For 3 days, she laid bare every secret she had uncovered, every conversation overheard, every piece of evidence painstakingly gathered. Her voice never wavered, even as she recounted the attempts on her life and the betrayals she had endured. As Maria stepped down from the witness stand on the final day of her testimony, she locked eyes with Eleanor Winters. For a brief moment, she saw something flicker in the judge's steely gaze. Was it respect? Fear? Or something else entirely? The defense, led by a team of the most expensive lawyers money could buy, fought tooth and nail. They tried to discredit witnesses, challenge evidence, and paint Maria as a gold digger out for revenge. But with each passing day, their arguments seemed to hold less water. It was during the cross-examination of Olivia Blackwood that the first crack in the defendants' united front appeared. Olivia, her trademark confidence beginning to falter under relentless questioning, finally snapped. "You want to know the truth?" she hissed, her emerald eyes flashing dangerously. "Eleanor Winters isn't just corrupt, she's a murderer." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's face drained of color as Olivia continued, her words tumbling out in a torrent of rage and resentment. Judge Winters didn't just blackmail and bribe her way to the top. She eliminated anyone who stood in her way, including her own husband. As Olivia detailed a decades-old murder that had been ruled an accident, Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Detective Harper, seeing her own shock mirrored in his eyes. This was a twist neither of them had seen coming. In the days that followed, the trial took on a frenzied pace. New evidence was uncovered, cold cases were reopened, and Beverly Hills found itself facing a reckoning long overdue. Through it all, Maria watched and waited, knowing that her part in this drama was far from over. For even as justice seemed within reach, a nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. There was still something missing, a piece of the puzzle she couldn't quite grasp. It was on the eve of the jury's deliberation that the final, earth-shattering revelation came to light. Maria had been working late at the safe house, poring over documents one last time, when she stumbled upon a file she had somehow overlooked. As she read its contents, her hands began to shake, and the room seemed to spin around her. It couldn't be true. And yet, as she connected the dots, everything suddenly fell into place. Maria reached for her phone with trembling fingers, dialing Detective Harper's number. "Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to come over right away. There's something you need to see." An hour later, Maria sat across from Harper, the damning files spread out between them. The detective's face was ashen as he looked up from the documents. "My God," he breathed. "Are you sure about this?" Maria nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It explains everything. Why I was always in the right place at the right time. Why I seem to have a knack for uncovering secrets. Why Eleanor Winters always looked at me with that strange expression. Harper ran a hand through his graying hair. But if this is true, it changes everything. The whole case could fall apart. I know, Maria said softly. But the truth has to come out. All of it. The next morning, as the jury prepared to deliver its verdict, Maria requested to address the court one final time. The judge, puzzled by this unusual request, nevertheless granted it. As Maria took the stand, a hush fell over the courtroom. She took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping over the faces that had become so familiar over the past weeks, the Rosewoods, Detective Harper, the reporters, and finally, Eleanor Winters and Olivia Blackwood. Your Honor, Maria began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart, I stand before this court to make a final statement. But more than that, I stand here to reveal a truth that I have only just discovered myself. She paused, gathering her courage for what she was about to say. The document I am about to present proves that Judge Eleanor Winters is, in fact, my biological mother. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Winters' impassive mask finally cracked, her eyes wide with shock and something that might have been longing. Olivia Blackwood's jaw dropped, for once rendered speechless. As the judge pounded his gavel, calling for order, Maria continued, her voice rising above the din. 35 years ago, Eleanor Winters, then a young and ambitious lawyer, gave birth to a baby girl. Fearing that motherhood would derail her career, she arranged for the child to be adopted by a family in Mexico. That child was me. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she went on, detailing how she had unknowingly been drawn back into her mother's orbit, a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. I don't say this to excuse Judge Winters' actions, Maria said firmly. The crimes she has committed are real and deserve punishment. But I stand here today to argue for mercy, not just for her, but for all of us. The system that allowed this corruption to flourish is as much to blame as any individual. As Maria stepped down from the stand, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. The revelations of the past weeks had been shocking, but this final twist seemed to have stolen the breath from everyone present. In the end, the jury found both Eleanor Winters and Olivia Blackwood guilty on multiple charges. But Maria's testimony had not been in vain. The judge, moved by the extraordinary circumstances, showed leniency in sentencing, emphasizing rehabilitation over pure punishment. As Eleanor Winters was led from the courtroom, she paused beside Maria. For a moment, mother and daughter looked at each other, years of lost time and unspoken words hanging between them. I'm sorry, Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking. For everything. Maria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As Eleanor was escorted away, Maria felt a chapter of her life closing, even as a new one began. In the weeks that followed, Beverly Hills underwent a transformation. The trial had exposed the rot at the core of the city's power structure, and a wave of reform swept through every level of government and business. Maria found herself at the center of it all, no longer a housekeeper but a symbol of hope and change. She used her newfound influence to advocate for the rights of immigrant workers, pushing for better wages and working conditions. The Rosewood family, stripped of their wealth and status, began the long process of rebuilding their lives. Victoria and Alexander, humbled by their fall from grace, dedicated themselves to charitable works. Ethan, after serving a brief sentence, threw himself into addiction counseling, determined to help others avoid the pitfalls that had nearly destroyed him. Olivia Blackwood, ever the survivor, managed to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation in uncovering other corruption cases. Even from behind bars, she maintained her flair for drama, promising a tell-all book that would make Beverly Hills tremble. And Eleanor Winters, the woman whose actions had set this entire chain of events in motion, found herself facing a future far different from anything she had ever imagined. As she began serving her sentence, she reached out to Maria, tentatively hoping to build a relationship with the daughter she had abandoned so long ago. For Maria, The journey of healing and reconciliation would be a long one. But as she stood on the balcony of her new apartment, looking out over the city she had helped to change, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Beverly Hills glittered in the distance, its facade of perfection forever altered. The secrets and lies that had once been its foundation were now exposed to the light of day. And in that light, a new city was emerging, one built on truth, justice, and the indomitable spirit of those who had dared to challenge the status quo. Maria smiled to herself, thinking of the unlikely path that had led her here. From a humble housekeeper accused of theft to the catalyst for a city's transformation, her journey had been one of hardship, courage, and ultimately, triumph. As the sun set on Beverly Hills, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Maria Hernandez stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. For she had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the power to change the world lies not in wealth or status, but in the strength of one's convictions and the courage to stand up for what is right. The housekeeper's secret had indeed shocked everyone, but in doing so, it had paved the way for a new beginning. And as Maria closed her eyes, feeling the warm California breeze on her face, she knew that this was not the end of her story, but merely the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, redemption, and the endless possibilities that come with fighting for justice.